Welcome, friends, to Tanked Up, the podcast, all about video games and beer. I'm one of your hosts, Ben, here with Adil.
Hey!
How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Good.
I was at I was at a craft beer pub earlier today, ostensibly working on job applications for a job I have.
Mm-hmm.
Nice thing is though, because I should show you the thing. It's yeah, I'm like, hello, I am currently applying for the teaching fellow in philosophy bracket, job number bracket, at Durham University. Period. I am currently employed as a teaching fellow in philosophy at Durham University. I'm like, fuck it. If you're going to make me to apply this job again, I'm going to just say it in my first two lines.
Oh, just thought, I mean, it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense to be like, you are making me do the thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you any good beers at the place earlier?
Nothing super remarkable, but I realized that I was at a coffee shop with a friend first, and then we had a lot of Skittles, and I think it kind of fucked my taste buds up for a bit
Right,
because I tried two different beers and they both had an aspartame finish, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird. Polly's doesn't usually have this type of finish." And then I had something else very different. I was like, "Oh, Skittles."
Yeah, they are very strong.
Yeah.
Yes. What are you drinking now?
So this is the thing. I thought we might have had a longer episode because oh no, I accidentally hit a button and now Microsoft Teams is anyway. So I'm drinking Tynt Meadow.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The English Trappist Ale, strong ale brewed by the monks of Mount St. Bernard Abbey in Charnwood Forest. The only Trappist beer in England, I believe, in the UK actually.
Yes.
So with this beer, we've returned to a 19th century tradition of brewing in our abbey. When our brethren arrived in 1835, they settled in a poor cottage on Tynt Meadow, now an extension of our monastic enclosure. So water, barley malt, sugar, hops, yeast. So I've heard from a couple people that it's not a bad Trappist.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I happen to have on my fridge another Trappist beer.
Oh, nice.
I figured I would just have these two green-capped Trappist beers and talk about the relative differences, which might be a bit unfair given one of them is my favorite beer almost of all time. But I had both and I thought it'd be a fun little
No,
flaw.
that's fair. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I had the 8 whilst I was in France. Walking sold in a supermarket.
Yeah.
I'm just like, cool, I'll have that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like €3.
So this is a 33 centiliter, 7.4% Trappist Ale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually kind of unfair because it's more akin to the 6 then.
Yes. Yeah. What's the 8?
And for those of you who haven't kept up, it's the Trappist Rochefort 6810 series that we were talking about as the other ones.
It's the 8, 9.99. Sorry, 9 or 9.2, 9.4. Yeah, something around there. Whereas the 6 is like 7 point something.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to drink another French beer this week.
Nice.
I'm coming up to that alcohol percentage as well. I am drinking a 9%. I would assume it's a double IPA, but I can't be sure. They don't give me a style. There might be some things on the internet I could probably look at, but this is Super Smash from Brasserie Des Abers. I guess it's Aber, Abers. It is, as I say, 9%. I don't know enough French to know what the very small chart tells me. I don't think it will focus enough for the for the text to be legible, at least on the screen. But the words are Couleur, Couleur, Amertume, or Amertum maybe, Amertume, Rondeur, Rondeur, and Puissance. Puissance. There's the most of that in it. I don't know, but again, don't know what that means. But there's like 80% puissance, if I'm saying that correctly. So yeah, I think it's a double IPA. but we'll find out, I suppose, very shortly. And come back to Tynt Meadow.
Have you had this before?
I have, not for a while. I think it probably tried. There's probably a podcast episode with me having it. I think Lucy may have also had it on an episode. But what did it release? Maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, as a beer. Maybe longer than that. Maybe more like 5 or 6 even. But probably had it somewhere around that first year, I would say. I won't give people an episode range because I've got no fucking idea. But search for it on outoflives.net and you might find multiple entries.
2017?
Okay.
But wait, sorry, that's when it joined the International Trappist Association, and it was released on 2018 July.
Okay.
And in September 17th, 2018, it received the Authentic Trappist product label and became the 12th official Trappist beer. I didn't realize there were only 12.
No, I didn't either. It's not many.
By July 2019, the Abbey produced 37,000 bottles of Tynt Meadow and was struggling to satisfy demand. It was said to have become particularly popular in Belgium and the Netherlands.
Nice.
Currently has an overall rating of 97 on Root Beer, 99 in the context of the style. That's actually interesting.
If you search for Tynt Meadow on outoflives.net, nothing comes up. So it's in an episode time where I didn't tag things appropriately.
Or I didn't, because that's definitely the era where I might have been also doing that.
We just threw them up and no one cared.
It's got a bit of an orangey color to it. It's not as super brown. I got it. It's a very cola-esque, watery nose. I suppose a little wet. Yeah, a little, like, I guess it must be a licorice-y type smell that I'm getting that makes it sort of cola-y. And a little sweet, but quite a light nose. Still a bit wet for me.
Okay.
A little thin. You can actually notice, like, the head didn't sort of stick around. It did build that much. Probably had about a finger of head, but lasted, not a lot of time. Sorry, yeah, I would say a bit chocolate. And a little more of that licorice. It's quite... So after a couple of sips, it's coated my palate. That wetness and the taste is kind of fading away. It feels a lot more rich. Like it just needed a moment for me to acclimatize.
It's just settle slightly.
Yeah, I think the head looked like it would stick around more, and I think I just was expecting something creamier on off the pour. It's still quite. I think that 7% is doing a bit of work to give it a bit of a viscosity, and because of that, it does coat the mouth really well. So, like, I would recommend having first sip kind of doing a bit of a swish to just hit all those points, so the subsequent sips are a bit more even. Yeah, the finish is a bit dry and sweet. It's got a bit of peak sweetness and then kind of dry, which I really like, actually, because it's not too in your face, not too strong tasting. Everything's sort of at a nice casual level of taste, like nothing's in your face, but all those tastes are there. I like that it finishes just a bit dry, so it's not lingering that much, but it's not so dry that you're like, must quench thirst again. So it kind of allows you to come back on your own time. And I have a feeling the finish is going to get a little more nuanced by the end, just because I'm noticing the sweetness is sticking around a bit more.
Okay.
The dark chocolate taste especially is kind of lingering on different corners of my mouth. Yeah. It's really good. I don't know if I've had it before. I can't remember, but it tastes like a Trappist. I think what the people were telling me, you'd be surprised, even though it's not Belgian. It's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it's from an old recipe. It tastes like it's a Trappist. It's got the badge, apparently. Yeah, I'm really digging that little bit of peak sweetness with the it comes at about the same time as the licorice kind of peaks as well.
Hmm.
Which gives it a nice. It takes with that sweetness. And make sure it's not too cola-esque. The two together just give it a bit of a different peak. So even though the nose was a bit cola-y, the rest isn't. It's a very good beer. Um, yeah, to be honest, this is because it's a bit lighter and like in the sense that it doesn't feel heavy and it doesn't have quite as boisterous or boozy a taste as some other Trappist. It feels like a really good summer Trappist, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I would like to drink it again soonish. Try and pick it up when I head to a bottle shop next, perhaps. Yeah, it's been several minutes since I have had that to have any kind of recollection at all. What you've described sounds lovely. I'd like to drink that again. So yes, difficult to retain that taste of a beer unless it really absolutely smashes you. Beers like that, which are like good and solid, and will be the same the next beer you drink, still difficult to retain that knowledge to come back to in several years to go, oh yeah, this is similar to what I drank previously, without being like, is it? They could have changed the recipe entirely and I'd have no idea. But being a Trappist beer, I imagine it is going to be almost exactly the same every batch that they kind of put out. But yeah, nice. Good to know that it's still going as well. So the Super Smash for me, it's quite light, but you can see a little bit of carbonation. But there's bits. There's a few bits sort of floating in the glass. Not that I've poured the entire thing in, so it's not. It might be a bit of sediment. You can see there's a little bit on the bottom of the bottle hanging around. The date on this beer, I would imagine it is the expiry is the 23rd of August 2026. So it's got a long old life on it, but a little bit of sediment floating around in my glass. Fizzed up quite a lot, but that's absolutely fine. And nose-wise, it's much more malty than I would have expected. But as I say, this beer does not give me a style. There is nothing on here which says it is an IPA or a double IPA or a bigger something. But colour-wise, and being at 9%, I would think double IPA is probably what it would be classed as. But very, very malty. A little bit toffee maybe, but a slight sort of a slight kind of sweetness on there, but maybe something that's edging a bit more towards it being slightly bready than kind of that burnt sort of toffee-ish kind of flavour. But it's somewhere in that sort of zone. Ooh. It's very rich as a flavour. It is more malty than anything else. But it's... or the sweetness that you get on the nose folds into the flavour much nicer than the nose might suggest it would. So it's very smooth. It's got a touch of a body to it, a little bit chewy, not too much. But flavour-wise, it's got that kind of... and I think this is where the chewiness is coming in slightly. It's got that toffee kind of sweetness to it. It's not sort of fudge. It's not that kind of level. It's got that little bit of a slight kind of bitterness to it with that sweetness, which is again why, and it kind of has that little bit of breadiness to it still as a malt as well in there. So there's maybe several malts kind of wrapped up into this beer, doing a lot of the heavy work. Doesn't taste like 9% in any way at all. Tastes like it could be maybe just a bit of a sweeter pale rather than like a 9% kind of beer. And again, with it being so malty, a little bit of carbonation with it, kind of driving that sweetness slightly. It's a bit of a conundrum as to how this beer is kind of presented as no style and just 9% liquid, I suppose. But it's very nice, and it's going back incredibly quickly. Have you ever heard of Brasserie Des Abers?
I have not.
That is there.
No, I don't
better
actually. I think my knowledge of French beers is pretty low, actually.
It's a lighthouse with the moon.
Oh, cool.
2 lighthouses with the moon. Yeah, potentially, I suppose. Lots of. I don't know whether it's a Brittany brewed beer. I could have a look. Is that France is? I've only realised since coming back, France is split into like sectors rather than like counties. And where we were staying, I think, was Sector 22, which seems like incredibly dystopian. But this has a 29 on it. So I'm just going to put in 29. This is information all available on the bottle. 830 Plus Dal Mezzo. Oh no, there's an E. France. There we go. Google knows. Plus Dal Mezzo is a commune in France. It's a town in Brittany. There we go. It is in Brittany, in northwestern France. So this was local-ish brewed to where I was staying. The department, there you go, region Brittany, Breton. The department Finistère 29. It's near Brest, which was kind of southwest from where we were staying. We were up on the north coast. So yeah, there we go. Locally-ish brewed beer for where I was, but very nice so far. Probably I maybe drank 8 or 10 different breweries, I suppose, including the couple of beers that I had on the episode last week. This is definitely one of the nicer ones. But as I say, very easy, little, quite sweet, but much more coming from the malts. So we'll see how this develops and see if it opens up at all as we drink. But let's move on to video games, topics, what we've been playing, or anything we want to talk about. And essentially, for the episode, I'm handing over to you, mate, because I've done nothing. I've played nothing. Well, actually, that's not true. I did, as a very, very brief anecdote, I have been playing a little bit of Borderlands 3. I might have mentioned it last week. Borderlands 3 came out 2 years ago, I think. It was on PlayStation Plus as an extra tier game. I say
2019.
Was. No, yeah. Oh, okay, so what did I say? 2 years ago? 4 years ago. Wow. So
that's why I was like, oh.
Yeah. I've enjoyed the Borderlands games. I thought I'd give it a go. I've been playing it. And suddenly, when I tried to play it yesterday, I didn't have access to it. It popped up saying, you don't have the correct tier of PlayStation Plus to be able to play this. Either purchase the game or up your tier. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's just gone from the extra catalogue. It's just been taken off. So a game that I have played maybe like the first... it might not be... Well, I suppose it's an act. I've got to a very specific point in the story. I've done like the first big area, or the first two, I suppose, big areas, and that's it. I'm not going to play it anymore. It's like 40 quid. I'm not paying that. So yeah, I'm not playing Borderlands 3 anymore. It was fine whilst I played it. It was Borderlands. It's no different to other Borderlands. You can probably buy the second game for like 5 quid these days. That's a great game. Play that one if you want to play Borderlands.
Borderlands is weirdly one of the few games that I got a free code or something, so I own it on Vita.
Oh wow, okay. The first one.
I was like staring at it on as I was filling up my memory card, and I was like, "Am I ever gonna play board?" Like, because I went on the PlayStation Store and filled up memory card with everything I own on Vita because I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen to these servers,
Sure.
and like I've got a larger memory card now, so I might as well take everything and then hopefully, when they inevitably turn the servers off, it doesn't mean that they have to call home or someone has figured out a way of like replicating that. And then I was like, I think I should check. If I own this on Steam, there's no reason I'll ever play it on Vita. It's like just not going to be as good an experience. And like if because there is some like online play, there's just the odds of someone on the Vita version playing versus Steam. Let's just say my money ain't on the handheld. So yeah, I ended up just deleting because it was like a large game. Also, why is Steam? There we go. Sorry, I also went to the wrong place. And the Steam client's kind of crap these days.
Yeah, they've updated it recently.
Yeah, it seems a little kind of laggy and slow.
Yeah.
I have Borderlands GOTY. I got it in 2017, and I have Borderlands 2. And Borderlands the pre-sequel, and Borderlands GOTY Enhanced, and Tales from the Borderlands on Steam.
Tales from the Borderlands is the best one.
Is it?
Yeah, because it's a Telltale episodic narrative game.
Did it actually end, or did it
it did.
cliffhanger because they gave up on that?
No, it did. It did end. I think again, was it last week I mentioned there's a new Tales from the Borderland that's come out. Maybe it was the week before. No, it wasn't the week before. We didn't record the week before. So yeah, so they obviously note that was a good game. The pre-sequel, I think I played a little bit of, but again, it's just more shooty Borderlands, just set before the first game. So I would say 2. If you're gonna play it, if you want a first-person shooter, Borderlands 2 is a solid kind of arcade shooter.
Yeah, which is why I would never play it on Vita versus PC for like frame rate. Like the Vita stick is okay. It's better than the horrible nubbin the PSP had, but like let's be honest, I have a Steam Deck. If I was gonna play it on a handheld, I'm going to play it on the powerful one with really good Joy-Cons, right?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Joysticks.
Absolutely. The reason that I mentioned that I've been playing it and that I'm no longer playing it is because I had no idea that it was just going to be removed. Nothing popped up. Nothing said, "Hey, you've been playing Borderlands 3. It's going to be removed from the store. You could buy it." There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I know that Game Pass, that is part of its messaging. Very much, hey, this game is leaving in like a week's time. You can get it right now for 20% off on the store. If you want to keep playing it, that is the option that you have. Whereas PlayStation's just like, nah, it's gone, mate. Buy the full version. Fuck you. Like, oh, all right, okay, fine.
Yeah, I guess I'll go fuck myself.
Yeah, well, exactly. I went and fucked myself and downloaded Final Fantasy VIII. Because I was just scrolling through the library. I'm like, I don't know what to play. I want something to play.
What version?
The remastered version. So where Squall is the best looking guy at the party. With his jagged, awful face. But... do
I have the remaster?
You've got... Yeah, you do. Actually, that's a recent release, actually.
I don't think I have.
Final Fantasy VII remastered.
These are on my wish list. $15.99.
Another
I just have
2019 game.
Mixed.
Yeah, mixed. Very mixed. I mean, it looks reasonable. I just want to play Triple Triad. Really.
This is not a remaster. They have just updated the character models and called it a day. Everything else is exactly the same. What an absolute disappointment. Give 8 a proper remaster, Square.
I mean, I think what they mean is they want to remake like 7.
Yeah.
But that's.
But prettier than the PSX version, GeForce system, 6 out of 10. Do not buy this, not even on sale. Once you're an hour, the game will crash every 10 minutes. Read other reviews. Also, a small window that says play upon open counts as playtime. Okay.
I mean, I'm probably quite happy doing it on, say, the PlayStation.
I mean, if it's just the
gonna be
character models and mild things, I'm happy to playing the non-remastered version that I own.
Yeah.
I think that's why it stayed on my wish list through multiple sales. But also, I want to play FF.
But I might not play that because I've just got a code, a PlayStation code for Somerville, which is a game that came out on like Xbox and PC, I think earlier in the year. It's just coming out on PlayStation at the end of August, so that will likely be the thing that I jump into next on the PlayStation when I get.
It's also on my wish list.
I also wanted to play. Lee got a PC code for. Oh shit! What game was it? Something else as well. Which we were like, yeah, that'd be cool to play. And he's like, have the code. I'm not going to play it on PC. I've got the Xbox version.
Right.
Something else I need to get to at some point because we have a code for it. But all things to come and discuss in future episodes at some point before the end of the year. Who knows when these things will actually happen. But
also, one of the codes we were offered is Cantata 1.0. I did the early access review of that a year or two ago.
Yeah. There was another code a week or two ago from a game I think you previewed as well, which we were
the
offered
Affogato?
a code for. Affogato, that's it, yes. But again, I don't know whether you had just a preview code, whether it was a demo, or whether it was just it's now updated to a full version.
I've just looked at the my Steam library, and I own Cantata because I got the early access. So actually, if we wanted a review of the 1.0, I could do it without a code because I own it already, thanks to the previous review.
Yes,
I think Affogato, I made the mistake of that was at the time where it's like maybe I should build my Switch library.
Okay.
And so I think I only own it on the Switch. And I played a couple hours and I didn't get too deep into it. Because it just takes a while to build up. It's like a reverse tower defense combat system, if I recall.
Yeah.
It was fun enough. Check out our YouTube channel if you're curious. I think that's not one of the ones I still have in a weird folder on an external drive that I found. It's like, oh, that's like half a year's worth. Well, no, that's like 2 months worth of streams I never quite published.
There's loads of them, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we streamed them, and then I talked about them on Tanked Up.
Absolutely.
That's all we had to do, but I had a period of time where I was like, I'll just dump the unedited Let's Plays on YouTube, and I don't think they get much views. So I don't know if it was worth doing.
Much like our YouTube videos for Tanked Up, which last episode is currently sat loaded into the editing program ready for me to actually get some time to do it. But that will be up for you, friends. You probably heard it already. There you go. Cool. That's me. That's all I've done. That's what I've got for this week. But I know that you've found a little bit of time to play something.
I did. So last week I talked about getting the Vita. I have a topic about that stemmed from farting around on the Vita and the jailbreak and all that stuff. But I did end up, after all that, I played literally 45 seconds of 10-second Ninja on the Vita. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I need this on this thing. And then I picked up the Steam Deck and finally started Transistor.
Oh, yes. I love Transistor. That was a great game.
Yeah, it was one that I really was excited for, and then it was in that one of the many times in my life where I feel guilty about playing games / doing a lot of starting but not finishing games, etc., or buying games hoping to find the time, blah. But from what I recall, it's like a sub 10-hour game.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and at no point have I ever been like, ah, that was a neat idea buying that, but I don't think I'll ever do it. This was
Hmm.
a game that I've always been interested in. Only like, you know, a few upgrades, like a couple levels in.
Yep.
But man, it's so goddamn pretty
Yeah.
already. And it even on the small screen of the Steam Deck, it looks gorgeous. The sound design is really good. It's really um, responsive.
Hmm.
Is it what I'd say? I will say it's not trying to hold your hand and tutorialize you. You start with two moves, and you've got four slots, and then you upgrade things or get things on new levels, and it's just like you could put this in an upgrade slot or buy its own move, and then it'll be like this upgrade. It will, when it's in a move, like I got Mask as my first upgrade. So it's like, you will go in stealth mode, and it'll mean when you hit something from behind, when you come out of stealth, you do bonus damage.
Hmm.
But if you use it as an enhancement on another move, it'll give that one bonus backstabbing damage. But also, if you put it in your passive slots, which are currently locked, so good luck trying to do that. You'll when you kill an enemy and collect its cell, you'll briefly get a speed boost and go into stealth. So you can use it as like a hit and run tactic. And I was like, oh shit, this is super deep.
Mm.
On level one, I realized, oh god, I'm gonna have analysis paralysis if I'm not careful, or I'll fall down the like Elden Ring optimal build type thing. And I was like, nope. You took Mask because you like playing stealth characters, even though you think Bounce is probably the better move. That just do whatever. And then like I died the first time, and it disabled my little dash move that I had unlocked or whatever or found. And I was like, oh shit, did I just lose that? Turns out no, you just like things you just when you die you lose one of your like upgrades or your moves for until you get to the next two access points,
Hmm.
which it was like, two access points. But it's neat because had already started to lean on the dash to like do a bit of hit and run or do a bit of like, just the dash works outside of combat. So it was like, oh, I don't need to plan too much because like for those who don't know, your base move is turn and everything freezes and you can kind of strategically move around and plan moves against things, and it'll tell you what will happen to them, and like a little bubble will pop up. It'll be like it's at 250, and if you backstab it, it'll be at 200 or like 150, and then if you hit it again, it'll be at 50, 100, and then you can move around in that. So it's kind of like doing like a tactics type thing, but you're moving not in bricks, but in amount of. There's like I'm sure maybe you can find out, but you have. If you move around too much, you'll run out of things you can do in turn. You can only do so many moves,
Mm.
and then after that, you don't get to use any of your moves. So before you go into turn, you can kind of just play it real time,
Yes.
and all your moves work. But until your like meter fills back up, such that you can use turn again, you can't use anything except for John or a couple of like outliers, which didn't realize right away. And so I was like, I'll just like beat this guy up a lot and then continue beating him up. Oh, I can't. Because I was killing things too quickly to realize I couldn't you keep fighting in the
Yeah.
first little chunk of the
Yeah.
game. And then I was like, I died because I didn't realize I had to. If I'm gonna going into the belly of the beast isn't great if there's multiple of them, unless you like are planning to hit a bit and running away, or have some other thing, right? But it losing a ability that I was relying on meant I kind of just was like, shit, how do I make this work? When I got to the next access point, right, I was like, okay, I still don't have this thing, so I just like tried different combinations of whatever sets were left, and I was like, oh, this is actually a really smart way of having lives have repercussion because you can't get stuck in a build because as soon as you get to a point where you die, you will likely lose something that you were relying on, so your playstyle has to change.
Mm. I think it's very smart in that way that it doesn't force you to kind of use all of the tools that are in front of you. You can play this as like an action game. You can absolutely never go into that kind of slowed down mode and line up all of the moves that you want to make. You could just bash your way kind of through this. And it's as a from Supergiant as a kind of prequel almost to sort of like the Hades formula. It sort of shows, I think, a like an early build of Hades almost, but with that extra element of being able to slow everything down and line up your kind of optimal sort of moves that you want to do, or looking to optimize a set of moves to get kind of like maximum damage and things out of it, rather than just hacking away at stuff. It kind of makes it slightly more, not necessarily intelligent, but it gives you that extra bit of strategy to be able to think things through a little bit more than the kind of slightly more reactive and very kind of like twitchy sense that Hades is. You know, Hades feels very twitchy. It's very reactive to kind of the enemies that come, and you can make your build and do all of these kinds of things, but it is to just get bigger and be able to deal with the kind of the threats that are coming in front of you, which are almost a bit unknown in Hades. Whereas Transistor, it is kind of progressing through unknown enemies and those kinds of things, and unknown abilities which you can unlock and sort of thing. But it just allows you a sense of build, maybe a little bit more than Hades does as well, and is maybe more of a strategic game that's so incredibly similar to Hades, but it just sits apart from it very slightly. And I absolutely love Transistor. I think I played it on like PlayStation 3, maybe, because it's a 2014 game, so almost 10 years old.
And it still looks.
Is it to PlayStation 3? Maybe it was a very early PS4 game. Perhaps.
Yeah, it was a Windows, PS4, OS X, Linux game, and then came to iOS the next year. Wow.
Cool. So very early within the PlayStation 4's life. Then I think I played this. This was one of those games I think I saw like on release and was like, yes, that looks like a kind of game for me. I shall play it. But yeah, interesting to go back to something like that as well. Considering like Supergiant are really good in iterating and kind of moving through various games. Going from Bastion to Transistor, then going to Pi, which I didn't play, but is...
It's on my list.
I think very, not similar to Transistor, but follows that kind of vein. It's a bit more kind of tactics, a bit more strategy, while still living in this kind of like action, real-time sort of space. To then just go to Hades as a roguelike action kind of game. For them to have Hades as their like big hit. You know, Bastion, Transistor, both incredibly critically acclaimed games,
but they never really broke out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hades then being the critically acclaimed game which did numbers, and then going, cool, our next game is Hades 2. Like, it makes sense business wise, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was a little disappointed that they in the same way. Right?
I agree, because I want to know, because as a studio they seem so clever in that iterative process and the evolution.
I'm hoping they're really going to do a different type of game and just capitalize on the Hades brand.
Yeah, that would be really good. There's probably a big section of the base of Hades users who do not want that, who want more of the same, essentially. Not the same, different abilities. You know, it's going with a different character this time, and stuff. But I think it would be really good to again iterate in a reasonable kind of jump, rather than just, you had this before, it does something slightly different. You had this before, it's now this instead. You know, having an extra element or changing the perspective or some of the core gameplay, I think is what Supergiant do incredibly well. So, they're a reasonably big studio now, and dependent on the scope of Hades 2, hopefully maybe they're making something else as well. but yeah, yet to be seen.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to use my downtime in the next couple of days to kind of not crank through it, but like enjoy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It hit the right spot at like 11:30 yesterday. I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I was like, oh, I like game. Why don't I
Yes.
game more? Um, I think I've been in a bit of a like watching random YouTube rut as far as downtime is concerned.
Mm,
And maybe I've finally had enough decomp from a very busy year to be like, I'd like active
yeah,
downtime,
yeah.
right? And it's like, right, I do like video games. I have to say, I've been thinking about figuring out if I can find a new schedule time for streaming again because it
Mm,
made me play games and it was really healthy for me in the pandemic and
yes.
post-pandemic to have that time to force myself to do like performative, yeah, sure, and it's a bit draining one way, but still just like I'm playing a game, and often I would play more of the game not on stream, but
Hmm.
like I have a weird relationship with the hobby when I'm busy.
Sure. I suppose it's, as you say, slightly performative, but maybe something like once a week, a little kind of hour or two sort of slot.
Yeah, like what I did before, right? It was
Yeah,
Tuesdays
yeah.
from 2 to 4 or whatever, and it was just like, look, guys, you're giving us a code. Adila's going to play the first couple hours. We're going to maybe talk about it on the podcast. We might put it on YouTube unedited.
Mm.
Again, we're not trying to grow into like a advertising subscriber based behemoth, so it doesn't matter if it's like a suboptimal
Sure.
like if we had someone who wanted to edit videos, by God, yeah, fuck. I'll say
Go
my stupid
ahead.
quips and you could cut the middleman out, but I don't have the time to do that, and it's
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, I
have to
mean
say one
that
thing
would
I
be.
read about. Oh, go on.
I was gonna say I'd enjoy sitting here as I used to, whilst doing some work, just having you on,
Mm.
watching you playing something, gives it a little bit more. Again, for the podcast, gives a little bit more context and a little bit more kind of conversation around seeing things that you had done as well for
Mhm.
kind of direct conversation around those kinds of elements. So
Um,
yeah, if you yeah, if you have the time.
I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, one thing I did learn out of this year, besides that L-Vance/Vyvanse is a hell of a drug, and you shouldn't take too much of it. Oh, yeah. So you did know because you saw me when I was bionic, right? I
Yes.
recorded the
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So I still haven't had caffeine because I need to wait for the analyst to send the data back to the GP, who said the premise of this whole exercise was then they would immediately send it. They would send it to cardiology because it's too weird a thing, and they were not enough of an expert. I'm like, so why doesn't the analyst just send it straight to the cardiologist?
Yeah.
But no, that's not how it works. Um, so actually, I think I'm in the. I've had to tell my family, like, oh yeah, by the way, just a reminder, I'm vegan, not vegetarian. Oh, also, I can't have any caffeine. This is an Indian family where we start the day with chai. Um, I'm like, what have I become? It's like my 40th birthday is looming. I also drink way less. I've been like a bit better about like I've for the past month or so kind of been like I might start the day with a non-alcoholic or something just to like make sure when I want a beer, it's because I want a beer and not because I'm at a pub.
Sure. Yeah.
Today's not one of those days. I had 2 half pints at the Holy Grail, and I'm having possibly 2 beers now. Oh no, but old habits, it turns out. Ugh. Um,
Boy.
yeah.
Talking of beers, unless there's anything additional you want to say about
Oh, what I
Transistor.
wanted to say was in my like slight reading up on Transistor because I was like, oh man, I don't remember any of the zeitgeist.
Mm.
Supergiant had actually mentioned that Magic the Gathering was a key early influence on the combat because
Oh.
they were thinking so the way they think of the moves, the little programs, subroutines as I call them, is
Hmm.
they thought of them as like cards in a deck, but in order to streamline the system, they ended up going to a simplified deck of 16 functions. But the whole point of like cards having multiple like roles it is very Magic the Gathering in the sense of like this spell does this, but in this context it would do this totally other thing, and that's
Sure.
what like was the notion which they eventually changed to like a card as a move and a card as an upgrade
Like as
to
a
a
slot.
move, right? As a slot, yeah. I just thought it was really interesting that they like saw what they took from Magic was with the right degree of complexity, card can play very different roles,
Yeah, the
right?
variability. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
As a final comment from me from Transistor, the sound design in that game is probably one of the best of any game ever made. It's soundtrack wise, just world sounds and effects and combat and stuff. It's just so good. I love a bit of jazz, and I think the only other game that's come close to Transistor on that sort of same thing is like Ape Out, which again it's its own reactive sort of soundtrack to it, but yeah, it's got such a phenomenal soundtrack. It's a very Transistor's just such a well-made product, that even as a nearly 10-year-old game, I think it's such an easy sell to people to play, especially those who've played Hades and want to kind of explore that genre that little bit more. Transistor is absolutely up there as best of. It's got to be, and it must have had multiple Game of the Year nominations for that year as well, I would think. Cool. We'll move on from Transistor then. Adel, you're going to open another beer, I think.
Yeah. So this beer, which we've already kind of spoiled, is the Trappist Rochefort 8. Like I've said multiple podcasts, because this is probably my most drunk beer on the podcast now that I think about it, because it's one of my favorite
It's
beers.
got to be. Absolutely, yeah.
Because I've definitely had it, I think, at least twice on air. And this will be lucky number 3. So it is a 9.2% Trappist. It brewed with water, malted barley, sugar, yeast, hop, and spices. 33 centiliters, 9.2%. I mean, if you haven't had this, even if you're not into dark beers, even if you're not into Trappist beers, try it out. Now I'll pour it.
I think out of the three, we've done this before. We've gone through kind of the 3 beers, the 6, the 8,
yeah. So they have
10.
the 6, 8, and 10, a single, double, and triple.
Yep, we've compared it against other kind of doubles as well, or Trappist doubles at least, or Belgian doubles, and stuff, and it just comes out on top all the fucking time.
I think it's a really, what I like about it is it proved to me that I didn't just like boozy beers, because the 10 is much. So the 10 is like a 12% or something, right? It's like a 6 point something, a 9 point something, and 12%. And it's boozy, and it's sweet, and it's too much of both, in my opinion. And this is a 9.2% beer, which most people say is too much for a beer, right? But like, it pours with a lovely kind of thick head, so it's probably lost half of its weight. But unlike the last one, you'll notice it's still sticking around.
Yeah.
It is actually lighter and more orangier in color. So it looks, with the ring light throwing through it, it actually looks almost like a red ale, but with just the room light. Even then, actually, it just looks quite a bit less dark than the Tynt Meadow. It's giving me an appreciation of just how dark, because the Tynt Meadow does describe itself as a dark ale, I think. Yeah, strong dark ale, and this is just a Trappist double. There's me pouring the rest of it in. You can see the head grows really well and slowly starts to diminish. Those of you in the audio, imagine what I just said. Oh yeah, I forgot how light the nose is on this beer. It's got a clean water, like it's got this clean, not clinical, but clean sort of nose. You don't get any of the alcohol. get some of the spices, but all very light and it's such a delicate nose. I think I'm a little too boozed out from the Tynt Meadow to get any real notes.
Okay.
Again, it just smells much more like yeah, more watery, and I don't mean watery. I just mean like
Clean.
there's not less, yeah, clean, not a lot going on. Not as in like it smells like a watery beer. It doesn't smell like a Coors, is what I'm saying. This beer. I'm now super curious how I've described this in the past, having mentioned that I'm trying to see if I can. I muted because I didn't want the click clack, but fuck it. Yeah.
Yeah. People
Our
expect
website's
it.
taking so long to load. But yeah, so the Rochefort 8, I would say it's a reddy copper color rather than like a dark brown orange color like the last one. It's so smooth, and again, that like 9.2%. There's a sweetness to it that just rides all the way through. It's definitely the alcohol, but it doesn't taste like it. There's no sickly sweetness about it at all. It's oh. I think what I like about it is a dark ale. It does have a sweetness to it. It gives you because of the spices. I assume I don't think it's the hops, but you get like dried dates and dried raisins a bit on the finish. Before it just again goes to this very clean but sweet finishing taste. Oh, it's just so malty and like again the sugariness is like brown sugar or something like dark and smooth rather than alcoholic. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't had it, it's like brown sugar, not quite Denver, just brown sugar, like sprinkled on kind of dried fruit, wrapped in malt. Nope.
Hello. Nope. Nope.
And I guess that sweetness has maybe like a caramel coating in the malts. But I don't know what you've had.
Yeah.
I think those are all the notes, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds about right.
It doesn't even matter what the notes are. Is the thing is like it's one of those beers where like I could look for the notes, but really when I drink it, I'm just like, God damn, that's good. I don't care it's dried fruits. I care it's just fucking great, and there's no moment in the taste curve that separates.
Yes.
I think that's what makes this such a magic beer is the fact that it's not that there aren't other tastes, it's that they flow so well into each other that you're just like, yeah, that was a great tasting beer. And you have to like force yourself to look for the notes because they do switch places.
Yeah, absolutely.
The dried fruits aren't there at the finish. The carameliness and brown sugar, it kind of lingers a bit more. But you're never going to do that if you just sip it because it all just flows well and they're all mostly there most of the time in a very good way. And it's not that they are muddled, it's just that they're blended well. So there's just this taste.
Yes.
Really nice taste that isn't mono taste. It has a curve, but it feels contiguous in a way that like most beers can't do. And that's actually kind of the part of the fun part of what we do here at Tanked Up is the fact that most beers don't do that. So you can kind of like look for it and be like, oh yeah, in the finish, this like estery thing pops out. Isn't that neat? And like, it's good that it has a transition zone and blah, blah, blah. And all the poncy shit we say every week, it isn't easy to do with this beer because it's just such a great flow.
Yeah, absolutely. If people want more Rochefort, you drank it on episode 225, where we were joined by Sean and Dave from Pillbug, and It was
I
also
think they also
drank.
talked about it a bit, right?
They might have done. I would imagine that Sean's drank that. That's definitely a Sean beer. It was also drank then by Curtis from Bitrock Games on episode 326 as well. We definitely drunk it before that. It would have appeared on early episodes when Alex was with us as well. You know, super single, either single or just double digit episodes as well. It's a beer that has that's kind of lived with us through our craft beer journey. You know,
Yeah, it's really good.
and it is just fantastic beer, absolutely. Maybe we'll get back to it and the Tynt Meadow towards the end of the episode. But you mentioned you had a small topic for this week as well.
Yeah. So again, for those who keep track, I picked up the Vita, put all my old games, the games I owned on it, and then I was like, oh, what does it take to jailbreak it? And then looked at games I could not have to grab my cartridges for.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately picked up the Steam Deck and put Transistor. But that whole exercise had, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a 256 gig micro SD card in the Vita, and part of this was like the completionist library searching, get the games I'm interested in stuff, and then wait for them to install, and that stuff kind of got in the way of using the device to play games. But it got me thinking. So like, I was looking at some of these things, and some of these games are like, oh yeah, I remember wanting to play this on the Vita. Do I actually want to play it ever? Right? Like,
Okay.
and so actually, I'm filling up the Vita with like weird corner. I mean, it's the Vita, so of course I'm filling it up with weird Japanese games that were inexplicably like localized and released to the English speaking market, because that's what the Vita was.
Yeah.
But it also can handle PSP games and PS1 games, and it's like, I'm never gonna play anything. Like at first I was like, oh man, you know what? I don't really play God of War games. Maybe I'll play the like recap collection that was released on the PSP or Vita or whatever it was. I was like, nope. You know what? I'm never gonna do that. Why would I waste anyone's time, like bandwidth, etc.? Do I actually want to play these games? And so it's ended up being like a weird. So games like Nova 111 that we've talked about in the past,
Yeah.
that's a small enough game that it's not going to be perfect on the Vita, but I would probably play it on the Vita. And so I was so one of the topics, so one of it is just the realization of like matching availability to platform, but the other was like how much so I had a conversation with someone about actually I was recording another chunk of Glass Onion Minute, and Ollie, my guest for that week that set of episodes recorded, I hosted, was like, he basically said like streaming is so weird that like if he didn't have to record this podcast, if he didn't see Glass Onion right away, he's not sure he ever would have seen it because of this like churn of like what's out now.
Sure.
Drowning, if you don't watch a thing out when it's first released, it basically doesn't exist. And I thought about this in the longer run of like, it's an interesting question to ask about, would you ever play a game that was released on an older system that you would have at the time, and it's not that you like care so much about graphics or fidelity or whatever, but would you really go back? So I just thought that was given my journey with the Vita, but also Ollie's statement about and to be honest, like I loved Knives Out, but when I missed the first couple of months of Glass Onion, if I didn't have this podcast, I'm not sure when I would have gone around to it, even though I really wanted to get around to it. And like if I think about a whole shit ton of shows and movies that have been on Netflix or Amazon Prime, it's the same thing. I don't actually watch TV. So I don't watch streaming TV and movies that much compared to some other people I know.
Yeah.
And so they're just things that like everyone tells me I'll enjoy, and I'm not like against them, but I've not seen. And now they're like 8 years old, and I'm like, I don't think I'll ever watch that. Not because it's bad, but because I'm almost 40 and realize that I'm mortal. So the like gaming platform version of that, where we're not looking at last week's streaming shows, but we're looking at like a generation or two ago.
Mm.
I thought it'd be interesting to just talk about, see what your thoughts were on like older games that you didn't hate or were interested in, but didn't get around to. Do you think you'll ever get there?
I mean, I think we've kind of skirted this topic previously when we've talked about our libraries, or Game Pass and PS Plus, and getting games that are that little bit older. I think the answer for me is always, and has always, at least whilst we've been doing the podcast, been more of a, I don't think I've got the time to get to it with all of these other kind of, the new releases and codes that we get coming through, and things that I want to look at playing, new games that are coming out and stuff. But there are those, there's games that I go back to a little bit, mostly kind of like strategy games like Civ 6 and that sort of stuff, where I will pick it up from kind of time to time. But that's stuff I've already played. It's one of those where, if say like a new installment in a franchise that I enjoy comes out, I'm likely to pick it up. Okay, I haven't picked up Baldur's Gate 3, but
That's actually one of the things that keyed this whole thing off.
Yeah. So I played the original 2 games, have played things like Pillars of Eternity, and I like the isometric kind of ARPG style of games. A lot of Diablo and not Diablo 4 actually, but I enjoy that style of game. But I haven't been pushed to play Baldur's Gate 3 or even Diablo 4.
I mean, I haven't for the Diablo games because, one, they're not quite my cup of tea. I never finished a lot of them, but also because of the microtransactions.
Yeah, I don't know with 4. Obviously, previous ones like 2. It's a fantastic game. Diablo 2 is like one of the best games I've fucking made.
Hard agree.
However, if I've missed those games now, do I think maybe in like 2 or 3 years' time I would go back to them? Like, maybe. But my time is becoming so limited to have, in terms of entertainment, that I think I've always, and it's always been a little bit like that, kind of like, right, I've got a load of work to do, I've got like 3 hours to play something tonight. Now it's like, cool, I've got a load of work to do, I will just work all night. I've got 3 hours a week to play something. It's usually, my thought will always be, what is it next? What is the next game to kind of get into? What's the newest iteration of something? What's the newest version of something I can play? Cool, Diablo 4 came out. Oh, but Baldur's Gate gives a similar kind of thing. I should play that. Oh, but actually, let's make up a game. Mutant Year Zero 2 has come out, and it gives a similar kind of thing. Or Pillars of Eternity 6 has come out, and it gives a similar kind of thing. That's the one I think I would gravitate towards. The one that's released a month, 6 months previous, rather than something that is 2 or 3 years old, potentially. Not because I feel like I've missed that, more because I think and I feel that a newer version will give me a more modern and more iterative experience, I suppose. Even if it's not in the same franchise. But you get so many games which don't clone necessarily, but take elements and copy certain elements and things like that, that I think it's very easy to find a facsimile which is more modern and might have more quality of life elements to it. That unless there is something which has been so critically acclaimed for a very specific thing that I cannot get anywhere else, writing or experience or something like that, that I wouldn't go back to it. There's some things that maybe if I hadn't played Transistor, you can kind of get everything that Transistor gives you in Hades. And if you have a very limited time to play games and you want an experience that is very similar, Hades is probably the top tier game to pick up and go and play. So that would be like the recommendation to do. If Baldur's Gate 3, in 2 years' time, has had a few copies, or not copies necessarily, but other games in that similar kind of genre have come out since. But everyone is like, the choice system in Baldur's Gate 3, the impact that it has on the world is still the best that has been produced in 2 years' time. Then that is the game to play, right? Go back and play Baldur's Gate 3, sure. So I think it takes something very specific but very good for me to go back to a game and experience it, say, like for the first time, if I've missed it over a couple of year period, probably.
Yeah, I think that's so I guess again, one of the things that struck me was like while looking through the Vita and PSP like libraries and like potential games, I was like, oh, the handheld moment of like playing in bed or like taking on a plane actually gives me the right space to think about these old games.
Yeah.
In a different way than like sitting at my computer. There's just spoiled for choice. I'm gonna go for the new or like the less stale things in my giant Steam library, right? And it was like, oh, this to me this is super interesting because it's like the form factor is doing some work there, but also like because some games just won't play as well a handheld versus big screen. But actually, it's the weird limitation, right? Like, there's a couple games on the Vita I never finished, but like one of the reasons why I picked up the Vita was because I knew I owned FF1 through X2.
Yes. Yeah.
On the Vita, and it was like I know the Vita is a great game to play that type of game. Great system to play that type of game, and actually I think it's better than the Steam Deck for those games because it's smaller. It's got a crisp screen. It's lower resolution than the Steam Deck, and that's good because these are old games that don't want big resolution, like shit like that. It was just like, and I remember playing Final Fantasy X a bit on the Vita, knowing the port was fine. The remaster port for the Vita was fine compared to because it's a PS2 game, right? Like
yes.
So I never played 10-2, and it was like, oh yeah, I don't want to play those games when I'm sitting at my computer. I don't want to play them when I'm sitting in my lounge. I might play them I originally was looking at playing an old school RPG on Steam Deck. And I was like, actually, the Vita is way better because it's lighter and it has a longer battery life. And like, if I just want to play one of these in bed before I fall asleep, that's better than the Steam Deck because it's just smaller and it does the thing I need. And then I thought like, oh, okay, so what other like of those types of games have I missed out on? And then I looked at the Vita library, like, oh, a billion ones. I don't know if they're any good. But the Vita sure had a bunch of JRPGs and weird games.
Yeah.
Oh, I got 256 gigs. Let's just play the game of filling the card up and then play the Steam Deck instead.
Yeah, you're a one-man preservation society for games almost. But again, I think it's juggling kind of that essence that like Final Fantasy X-2, the main pull of that game is that it's a direct sequel to Final Fantasy X. So people who have played Final Fantasy X and want to experience more of that story, playing X-2 makes sense. But actually, they changed the game in a way that X-2 has a costume system. So it's only got 3 characters to play as, but it has a costume system.
I believe the Zeitgeist called it Pretty Princess Dress Me Up.
Yeah, it absolutely is that. In
a good way, to be clear.
Yes. That reflects, I think, Final Fantasy V, maybe? Or a shift in job systems in Final Fantasy games. But again, if you want to play a pixel version of it, there is an older Final Fantasy game which has a similar kind of mechanic to it, but actually as a slightly more modern take, you'd probably pick X-2. And I don't think any other game has that level of kind of job switching and things like that. The same as like Final Fantasy XII. It had a very good upgrade system. Like the web which built on what was done in 10 is very good but that's not like a selling point for a game necessarily. That even with those bigger experiences versus something small. So when you pick like a tiny game, something like let's take a critically acclaimed tiny game like Limbo or Inside, something like that. Those are games to go back to if you missed, right? Because they do something that a lot of other games have never replicated kind of since. And actually having an experience of something like Inside on a slightly different and slightly more personal, smaller screen. So, and I don't think Inside exists as a Vita game. Limbo might exist as a Vita game. Maybe it caught the Vita. But I think something like that is a good little pull to play on those kind of consoles, versus saying, "Cool, I'm picking X game because it has this feature that no other game has ever kind of picked." I don't know whether, again, when we were talking around this, I mentioned kind of having the cart for the DS. And essentially filling it up with a bunch of Japanese games that I'd never heard of, let alone played any iteration kind of. And the one that always sticks out to me is Elite Beat Agents. And it's basically like, it's just a rhythm game, right? But it's one of the kind of first rhythm games I guess I ever sort of played, where there's just these three kind of characters dancing and you're tapping the screen or pressing buttons in the beat to sort of the game. And I'm like, this is fucking cool. I love this. So having an experience that you've never had before, absolutely. That's the kind of the thing to, or at least in my opinion, the thing to sort of chase with this slightly more nostalgic kind of look back on things. And it's easy to go back to games like Civilization 6 and go, cool, I'll play like, a game of this.
Mm-hmm.
But actually then, I think when I played Civ 6, I got bored quite quickly. So like, I've done this. I played this game. I played it when it came out. I don't need this experience kind of right now. So for me, it's definitely chasing, slightly different experiences, I would say, in that space.
Great. I mean, yeah, so I think I really just want to talk about, like, as gaming gets older, like you were looking at FF8 and like old games, for me, very similarly, right? I was looking at Final Fantasy games because I have nostalgia,
Yep.
not because I have like an urge to revisit. But there is something to be valued about some old games, even if they're clunky. And like, I've been meaning to like check out the Persona games, and I like did a Reddit deep dive, and people like, if you want to play more than one of these, start with Persona 3, and then there's this weird argument about which version of it, which fine, whatever. I don't want to get into that. But the reason being is if you play Persona 5 because of all the like quality of life upgrades, you're not going to enjoy 3 and 4, but they're good stories, and if you don't know any better, you'll enjoy 3 and 4. And then when you hit 5, you're like, oh, this is even better. But if you play 5, you can't go backwards because there's this like the interactive and the iterative and the like technological role that games have that like books and movies really don't, except for like the bad times of early CG and like the move to digital cameras, such that like 1999 through 2008 is a bad time for movies to rewatch them. Right? That's like the only thing film has really had.
Well, I guess that's why we have so many game remasters, right?
Yeah.
Something like the Yakuza series, which has split off into like a Judgment, and then the Like a Dragon, or at least they're called kind of over here, the Like a Dragon games. These kinds of games that have come out in Japan a couple of years ago and then have found their way over here to us. That there is the kind of collection which bundles, I think, Yakuza 1, 2, and 0 together as remastered versions. Because I suppose from a nostalgic point of view, people wanted to revisit them, but didn't want to experience the game in that same sort of, slightly blocky, slow, maybe a little bit clunky kind of sense. And even with the Persona games, there's like Persona 3, like Golden, and is it S that came out as well, or maybe that was
That's
5
literally why I brought it up.
S that came out as well. That they are, developers are going back to their older catalogs and updating them very slightly as new products. That you can get to a point where actually, and we've talked about Yakuza a little bit, and being like, cool, we realistically start them in order that they've been produced, not necessarily chronological order, but if you're going to run through these games, run through them like 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 5, 6, and then into the Like a Dragon and Judgment kind of games, going further from those. So almost in the back of our minds, we already have these thoughts of being like, if I play the latest version, I will play 10 minutes of the first game and never want to go back to it kind of ever again, probably. I'll just play the latest game again.
Yeah.
The same as like, you're going to play Elden Ring, you'll go and play Demon Souls on a PS3 because you have the system and the game.
Yeah.
And you're going to go,
describing my living room at this point.
Yeah, turn that one off. Maybe play the remastered version on PS5, or just go back to Elden Ring again and play more of that instead. There is always a better experience.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing about games, and like we talk about like old games and like taking them as they are, but like with remasters and things, you kind of don't have to in a certain sense. And also, like, there's too many games. Like, I literally own enough games that if I stopped buying them now, I would die before I finished all of them.
Yes.
And that's not because I'm a weird heart issues. That's just like a...
No, absolutely.
But and what am I doing? I'm thinking of starting another Final Fantasy blah again because I fucking love those games. And it's like, yeah, I don't want necessarily new games. I'm like eyeing Baldur's Gate 3 and then realizing it's about what you want in the moment. And like some of the old games just tend not to be that in a certain sense because unless you have nostalgia, there's just like it. I think what it is like the entertainment part of gaming as an art form is still front and center. There's so few games that are like art for art's sake.
Sure.
That like, look, when you have a type of entertainment that is more polished, we're going to lean towards that. And I think it can be that simple, right? The reason why both of us who appreciate old games and have played old games and will play old games for the rest of our lives, like, still live in the zeitgeist, etc., is because ultimately there are very few games that you play not just for entertainment, and nostalgia is one of the things that brings you there.
Yeah.
And like Before Your Eyes is one of those games that like really tickled me in a way that it was an art interactive thing that you couldn't do with a book or movie. But at the end of the day, it was still entertainment, even though it was a very interesting and heart-rendering story. If I wasn't entertained, including the novelty of the way it like communicated and made you interact, I wouldn't be so strongly into it. And because of the moment I had it, even and like it's got a fairly forgiving art style, etc. In 5 years, I'm still going to recommend it to people. I don't know if I will in 15.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's just a fact, which is weird.
I mean, again,
I think this is why I like games, because there's such a unique art form that's like really hasn't come to grips with themselves as an art form.
Absolutely, and it will only evolve and iterate again more so. Film as as an art form is kind of limited in terms of its kind of iterative ability. Games has got that massive breadth of what you can kind of do as an active entertainment product versus film or books. So yeah, I think if you asked us the same question in 5 years' time, we'd have a different answer again. Maybe even in 2 years' time, we'd have a different answer again, or a different life, not necessarily time period, but just a different
Yeah,
point
we'll
in
be at
your
different
life. You
stages,
know, a different.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have still managed to have to apply to the same job for the 15th year in a row. Uh,
Oh dear. Still wondering in August that you've got a whole curriculum to write in 2 weeks' time, whether you're going to be doing
yeah,
it or not. It's a good place for us to finish, I suppose,
yeah.
this week. So we'll return to the beers.
Hmm.
I will mention one thing that I enjoyed it. The sweetness dulled down very slightly, but it was just as drinkable. The chewiness disappeared a little bit as well, but it's a very nice beer. Super Smash from, what was that, Brasserie Des Abers. Yeah, if you're in France, if you're in Brittany, look for it. It's good. But the experiment of the evening, the Trappists.
I mean, no, I kind of told everyone I knew what the things were gonna be because it's one of my favorite beers, and like we've just talked about nostalgia and like the goggles has and like. But no, I think the Rochefort 8 is a better beer, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's a shock, nor do I think the Tynt Meadow would be insulted by that.
Sure.
It's one of the best beers in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I actually really enjoyed the Tynt Meadow, and I'm going to start seeking it out more often. Kind of like I said, it's weirdly, it's like a darker ale with
Mm.
a lighter ABV. It's a bit more cola-y, but also that like it's got a thinness to its like texture that belies even 7.4%, which means like it's like I called it like a summer Trappist beer. And
Mm-hmm.
like I'm never not in the mood for a Trappist beer, if I'm honest. And so like if it was like even 25 degrees and I was at a pub and they were like, we got Tynt Meadow, I'd be like, I could have that. I I would want the Roquefort A because I always want the Roquefort A, but I
Yes.
wouldn't order it, right? Like I could have a 20 degree, 22 degree, maybe 25 might be pushing it, but like patio Tint Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can do that with the Roquefort
Yeah. Fair.
A. And that's really interesting. They also live in very different spaces, right? The Roquefort is much more brown sugar, dried fruit, and again, this like just beautiful presentation and taste curve that's like not a curve, it's like a contiguous vector or something. The Tint Meadow is it's got that licorice, it's got a slightly cola-esque taste, which
Mm-hmm.
again really made. I think that's one of the reasons why I think it'd be good on a hot day. It doesn't taste like cola, but has just that hint that and that again that thinness, which is not a bad thing, right? It just means that it has like more flexibility to not feel a bit too heavy or a bit too overwhelming in like a non-standard Trappist ale moment in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of both of them. I'm one of the biggest champions of the Roquefort 8, but like the Tint Meadow is, I think I'm just gonna keep an eye out for it. Like it's made in Leicestershire, I think. But I'm sold. The English can do Trappist. It's the only one in England, and like, yeah. If that means it's affordable here in the same way that when I was in the Netherlands and you were in France, you could just find the Rock 8. Um, I would have a lot more of this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When it becomes a supermarket staple over here, we know that we're living in a golden age
Yeah.
of stuff. It will be like 10 quid, but it's available at least in the supermarkets.
Yeah.
Good. So they're the beers and they're the games that we've discussed this week. If you want to let us know what you've been drinking or playing, we're at Tanks Upcast on the socials. I'm at Nova_47. Adel is.
Yeah, at the Omniarch.
And you should go to outoflives.net to look at the beers that we've been drinking in video form if you don't already, or the YouTube page as well, where you can see, as mentioned, Adel's previous streams of lots of
Yep.
games. When was the last one? Maybe like 18 months ago? something like that. Maybe 14 months ago.
We might actually. So YouTube now has a podcast section.
Oh.
Or title. So we might end up rejigging the studio, the channel.
Okay.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fine. Sorry. I was distracted trying to find our last video that wasn't tanked up. Was first looks at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection 10 months ago.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Oh yeah, because I did stream right until I moved to Durham.
Yes.
And I moved to Durham October 1st. But I started my job September 1st. It was a bit of a weird year. Affogato was 11 months ago.
Yeah. It seems a lot longer ago than that, doesn't it?
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so head to there, and then to be honest, message us on any of our platforms or leave a comment on our YouTubes, just saying, did you enjoy the streams and or Let's Plays, and if you want more of those, because I'm on the precipice, and if someone enjoyed it, I would probably do it.
I did. I enjoyed it.
All right.
No, but as Adil says, let us know, listeners, if you did enjoy it. I think that's all the places and all of the things that we need to discuss this week. Thank you for joining us. Episodes go up when we have time to put them up, so sometimes there's a bit of a lag, but they'll be there for you to enjoy in the future forever. This week, we've been tagged up. Goodbye.
Bye.
www.outoflives.net